This is the Forgecast, your eye into the who's who and what's what in cybersecurity and the cloud. Each episode, we bring you fresh perspectives, personal stories, insights, and advice from leaders, innovators, and change makers forging a stronger future.
Welcome to the Forgecast. I'm your host, Leo Casusol, and this afternoon is my pleasure to have with me my good friend, Ricardo Villadiego. From now on, we're going to call you RV because that's how everybody knows you. RV, he is the founder and CEO of Lumu Technologies. RV is a successful serial entrepreneur with over 30 years in experience in developing, selling, and implementing technology solutions globally. And he has deep expertise in cybersecurity, financial risk, and fraud prevention. Before Lumu, RB founded Easy Solutions, a company that was focused on identifying and preventing electronic fraud. With deep roots in Latin America and under RB's leadership, Easy Solutions expanded into North America and eventually became a vibrant business inside Cyxtera Technologies. It was then when I had the opportunity and pleasure to meet RB and work alongside him for several years. Now, as the CEO of Lumu, he has a grand vision to protect businesses globally to continuous compromise assessment, detection, and response. Ricardo, welcome, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks for the invitation, Leo. Glad to be here.
Fantastic. Tell us about you, about your background and your upbringing. I think most people know that you grew up in Colombia. So we would love to know, your career and why did you decide to become an entrepreneur?
So where we start? Let me go back to Cartagena, magical city. I don't know if you have been in Cartagena, but if not, that is a place that you should. It's a vibrant city, probably the best, last day of the year you spend in Cartagena. I studied there, I grew up there and then moved to Bogota to study electronic engineer. And while I was in Bogota studying electronic engineering, I had the opportunity to join the internship program for Unisys Corporation. And they assigned me this task that I think changed my life, right? This task of building a driver so the ATM machines of the time where we get money, were able to speak TCP/IP. At the time, those machines were talking different protocols. So I had this task in front of me, start building that driver, started understanding the protocol. And I quickly concluded that protocol was really weak and that if banks were going to put transactions over that protocol, bad things were going to happen. So that was late 90s into 2000s. And, I went into Unisys Corporation security program. From that, I moved to Internet Security Systems, who was a company that was fully dedicated on cybersecurity, probably one of the fathers of cybersecurity as we know it today, right? And had the opportunity to work with the team that was scaling the business across Latin America. So I learned a lot of go-to-market, a lot of product marketing. When Tom Noonan sold the business to IBM, I stayed at IBM. But I started quickly building in my mind the idea of building a company from those initial knowledge that I have from how banks were going to be attacked because of the transactions over the internet. Internet at the time was taking speed, and banks were putting their transactions online and moving those transactions on digital channels. I ended up deciding building my first company, Easy Solutions, to tackle the anti-fraud problem. That is a huge problem. It still is today. And I think it's going to continue to scale. But that was kind of the beginning of RB into the entrepreneurial scene.
So your time at Unisys, you started your career from a technical point of view. And you helped customers understand the weakness of the technology that they were using to serve customers. And then you were supporting sales efforts. And you ended up, for a period of time, having a very successful career in sales, where you were selling all over Latin America, and you were building a very large network of contacts that served you later to build the foundation for Lumu. How do you relate that sales engineering and sales experience to becoming an entrepreneur? Is it something that really helped you get to where you are today?
It did, but I became a sales guy by accident, right? I was a technical. I studied electronic engineering, like I said before, and I love to build software. And I love to build software because I think, Leo, that's the only thing that you can do with just a laptop and your brain, right? Any other thing that you want to do, you have to buy stuff. Software is the only thing that you can do with a laptop, an internet connection, and your mind, at your hands, right? I often say, like, there's no limit to the potential of creation that has a laptop, an internet connection, and your mind. And I've loved doing that. However, at the time, remember, early 2000s, cybersecurity, I think we didn't put cyber to security. It was only security, right? And the sales guys of the time, they were making a bunch of more money selling other stuff. No one wanted to sell security. I was the only crazy guy across Latin America thinking that this was going to be a huge problem. So I convinced my bosses of the time, let me sell this thing myself. So I was selling it, implementing it, training the customers into the solutions that we were selling at the time. It helped me because when you see the complete cycle of product development to marketing the technology to the customer, to supporting the technology on the customer angle, deploying it, you really are covering most of the things that are required to build a company. That it's, I think, is an asset that when you connect the dots now, looking backwards, helping me to build the foundation of the founder that I am today.
We always say in the VC world that you either have a problem looking for a solution or a solution looking for a problem. When you created Easy Solutions, you knew there was a problem in the marketplace. You knew that banks were putting those transactions at risk. And you had an idea for a solution. And you assembled a team of people in Colombia to build this solution. And then you decided to go to market. What sort of early challenges did you face when you took Easy Solutions to market for the first time?
When I even go there, it was crazy, Leo. It was crazy because, for starters, cybersecurity, Latin America is not a market at the time that was a producer of cybersecurity companies. Still, it is not, right? Most cybersecurity companies doesn't start from Latin America. Most of them start from Israel, from Europe, and of course the United States. So it was challenging for the market to validate that a technology that was going to be built from Latin America was going to be able to solve the problems that they had. At the time, I was competing with RSA, with IBM, with some of the big leaders, the big names in cybersecurity, tackling the anti-fraud problem. So that was one of the first problems. The acceptability that the technology could be built in Latin America. The second is access to capital, right? The people were telling me, bluntly, like, Ricardo, I think you are on drugs. That's not possible. It's not possible that you can build this company and have this ambition of building the global leader of anti-fraud from Latin America. It's just impossible. And when I was going, knocking on the doors of the VCs to pitch the story, they all said that the story was compelling, but they didn't really relate to that idea of building a company where the development team was going to be in Colombia, right? So it was challenging to get access to the capital to build the business. I remember one of my investors at the time saying, why don't you go back to LATAM, try to convince people to invest in your business in Latin America, expand a little bit, and then come back when the idea is more proven. And that's exactly what I did, right? I take my first 3.6 million on that business from a venture capital in Colombia. early venture capital. There were no VCs in Colombia. It was like this only group and no one else. And we started convincing banks across Latin America on deploying easy solutions. And then at some point, Gartner started calling easy solutions, looking to speak with me, because they were getting this feedback from banks that were displacing RSA and IBM to deploy easy solutions. And that's how we got into the Magic Quadrant for the first time of online fraud prevention. And now the investors in the US started to take a look at the company. But a lot of challenges on market acceptability, on access to capital, on making sure that the team, right, also the team that you were acquiring at the time to build the company, you had this visionary trying to push the idea that this dream was gonna be able to be built, but there was no evidence that this could be built from Latin America. So giving the confidence to the team that we have, to a research and development team, to the sales team, to the marketing team, that we had an idea that was that had the potential to become a huge success, which eventually it did.
One of the things that you and I have talked about before is Latin America, from a US or global perspective, is normally considered a single market, when in reality each country has unique characteristics in terms of economic groups, way of doing business. In fraud specifically, each country has different attack vectors that banks need to react to. When you took your company and you expanded outside Colombia, what was the strategy and the lessons learned that you got from building a Latin American business and then later on making a successful crossover into the US? Because that's when you and I met, right? When you were already an established player in Latin America, and you were already selling successfully in the US.
There were also a lot of learnings and to some extent a lot of frustrations into that process, because translating a business from Latin America to the US is not a streamlined process, right? Just like it is not a streamlined process to translate a business from the US to Latin America, right? You have to adapt to the business. And in my case, I'm a technical founder, and I thought at that moment that the same problems the banks in Brazil were facing were similar to the problems the banks in the US were facing, and that's not necessarily true, right? And because that is that is untrue, then your product evolves in a way that is incapable to solve the problems of the customers that you have in the different markets that you're trying to serve, right? One of the things that we did very different at Lumu was to expose the technology to the US market from day one. And that gave us the ability to evolve the technology in a way that is solving problems from multiple customers, across multiple verticals, across multiple segments. But going back to Easy Solution, that was one of the things that we have to go back and refactor some of the technologies to ensure that it was appealing to the US customer as well. There's other problem that exists in Latin America that is overlooked by many vendors in cybersecurity and across other markets. And it's the labor, cost-effective labor, as in the way your technology is evolved, right? In the US, because labor is so expensive, technology tends to become almost self-managed. There's a lot of automation involved in the technology that you build because labor is so expensive. In Latin America, you can solve anything with cheap labor, right? The gaps that you have in the product can be solved by adding more people to the problem. It's something that is good, but at the same time it's bad depending on the markets that you're trying to serve. We have to manage all those problems to ensure that we came to the market with a very compelling offer for US and then Europe and then APAC and EMEA, because Easy Solution, I remember, really having calls at 3 a.m. in the morning because Japan was waking up, and we have the largest bank in Japan using our transaction anomaly detection technology.
Obviously, you learn quite a bit building easy solutions, and you had a successful exit of the company when we created Cyxtera, and then you got the bug again of creating something new, and that was the genesis of Lumu. And you did two things that are super interesting that I would like you to share with our audience. Number one, you changed the scope of the technology and the problem that you were going to solve. You step away from fraud, financial crimes, transaction monitoring into cybersecurity, pure technical cybersecurity. Number two, as you said before, you decided to design and build a product for the North American market at the same time that you were building that solution in Latin America and serving the needs of your Latin American customers. Talk us about that evolution, that change of mind and the genesis of Lumu. And maybe for the benefit of the audience, explain a little bit more in detail what Lumu does and what does it really means to measure continuous compromise in real time, which is something that is novel and unique in the marketplace.
It is. And it started, when I got more time in my hands after the exit of Easy Solutions, I started researching into why some of the largest breaches at the time, think of Target, Home Depot, UPS, Equifax, why the adversary was within those companies between 18 to 36 months. Why those companies, with the budget that they had, the amount of technology that they deploy in cybersecurity, were unable to identify that the adversary was within the company. And then the end result of that process was they weren't looking for the compromise, right? They weren't looking for the adversary within the company. So that start changing the way you tackle the problem. What if somehow you can measure in real time what's your state of compromise? What if you can do that continuously and now prove continuously otherwise, prove continuously that you are not compromised? And then when we started building this idea with some of the early members of Lumu, we went to some of my banks that were customers of Easy Solutions, and we pitched them the idea, right? They said that makes perfect sense. We are not doing that continuously, yet we had the data that enabled us to do so. But in their mind, they were collecting the data so that when they had a problem, they had the ability to do that research. It's completely ineffective, right? You have the data, but you're not using that data. You're only going to use the data the moment that you're compromised. Why don't you use the data to identify early signs of compromise and eliminate the larger problem? So the learning from all that process is even though they had the data on the SIEMs, right, the legacy SIEMs that they were using, they had this idea that the data is accessible to them, but SIEMs store the data in such a weird way that data is not available the minute that you require the data to do an assessment. So that was the first signs that there was a problem to be solved, is how you capture that data and make that data, instrument that data in such a way that you can ask questions to that data in real time about the state of compromise. I remember this bank telling me, Ricardo, I had that data. I want to do your compromise assessment. Here is the contact of my technical guy. Let's make sure that he provides the data. 1 week goes by, they weren't able to access the data. A month goes by, he said, we opened a ticket with the SIEM provider. They were unable to get 1 year of data from the SIEM so that we could do that assessment. And then to make the story short, once we get the data, we were able to identify a couple adversaries within the network of this large bank. And that solidified the idea of there is a problem to be solved on making continuous compromise assessment in real time and available to customers of all sizes, which is the other problem, is that only the big guys that may have the dollars to deploy in this type of technologies I have the data and all the capabilities to implement continuous compromise assessment. But the reality is a problem that is affecting companies of all sizes and all verticals. And I think the novel thing that we did at Lumu also is that we made this problem practically implementable for companies of all sizes. And we have, the smallest companies that we're serving, Leo, may have less than 20 endpoints or 20 users. The largest company that we're serving today have over 250,000 users. So it's the same technology, right? It's the same capabilities that we provide. And there were other learnings that we included in this process, but I don't want to monopolize the conversation.
I think what is super interesting for everybody is to understand that your vision was, I need to process data in real time in order to validate or demonstrate that my customer is not being compromised. And you had to start with one specific type of data. We all know that in cybersecurity, telemetry or data sources are abundant, and you can take data from multiple places. But you took a very interesting approach. You saw another break in the market. You said, I am going to use this specific data to assess the potential compromise. What was that, and why did you pick that specifically?
That was the network. And I told you what is the network, right? A network that's compromised behaves differently than a network that is not. We're firm believers there, and we validate that day in and day out in every one of the companies that we are protecting. Why that data? Number one, because it's overlooked by the traditional vendors. It's overlooked because it's complex. It's a lot of data. If you put that data into the SIEM, your ingestion cost is going to go through the roof. But not all that data is relevant. The magic that we did at Lumu is that we collect that data and we instrument that data in such a way that we can store that data for 2 years and query that data, those 2 years of network metadata that we're storing for every customer in real time for the more than 2,500 customers that are using our technology today, right? That's the magic. And then the other is that regardless of the controls that you may have your EDR, you may have your firewall, your SASE technology. If the bad guy bypass those technologies, he's going to land in the network. And those other controls, you can tamper those controls. As a matter of fact, if you look at one of the DEF CON conferences from this year, there was no EDR vendor, there was no bypass by one of the latest POCs about memory hooking. All of them were bypassed. So when the bad guy bypassed the EDR, he's going to land in the network. If the guy tries to tamper the network, the end result is that they're not going to be obtaining the evil effect that they want, because the network, they're not going to get the communication that they require, the filtration, or the access to the command and control commands that they require. So the data doesn't lie, right? The network doesn't lie. That is the other reason why we got into collecting telemetry from the network. And lastly, if you can eliminate a lot of blind spots in the network. The traditional approach in cybersecurity, Leo, has been to collecting telemetry from crown jewel segments, right? And the reality is that a cyber attack doesn't start in crown jewel segments. It ends on crown jewel segments. So when you decided that your protection strategy is monitoring crown jewel segments, you are implicitly deciding that you don't want to review the early signs of that compromise. You only want to review the compromise when it's at the end of the problem. So you have, in modern attacks, you have less than 5 seconds to react when the attack is identified on a crown jewel segment. While when you identify the attack in the early stages of the evolution, you have plenty of time to eliminate that attack that is never going to evolve into something that is really critical in your organization. So that approach provides, it just changes the dynamic of how SecOps team works. From putting out fires to becoming more strategic in their organizations.
Absolutely. And I want to double click on something that is very, very unique also about Lumu, right? It is impossible to use traditional methods of data analysis to process all the telemetry that you are consuming. Yes, you did start it with network, but now you consume all the telemetry available inside the enterprise, from cloud vendors to EDR solutions to, firewalls and network devices, etc. But you guys didn't apply traditional methods. Today, we all talk about AI and, the hype of AI, but you guys were an AI company from day one. And talk to us, why did you took such a big gamble? Why did you apply expensive, complex, and hard to develop and deploy technology to process this data? And how much benefit have you gotten out of that investment?
Well, it's if you recall, connecting the dots again, right? My easy solution time with my Lumu time. Remember the cost of labor, right? How the cost of labor affects the technologies. And some of the learnings that I have from one company to the other, it's in those lines, right? How we not go on the same mistakes twice. We needed to process this amount of data to significantly automate the detection process. So we built a patent-pending technology to detect compromises in the network that we call the illumination process. And that illumination process involves different stages, right? We do correlation with non-IOCs. Everyone does that. We just do it better. But the magic of the AI capabilities are when you have filtered all that network metadata, the data in collision with non-IOCs, that we ingest that into the first AI engine. That first AI engine is called anomaly detection. And what it does is that it maps the network of every company, like if it were a vocabulary. And AI is very good at detecting anomalies across that vocabulary. So now we know exactly when a company is speaking with an IP address, a domain, or a URL that it wasn't speaking before. That is an anomaly. Traditional NDR technologies, they often put those anomalies to the analysts, to the security analysts. But those anomalies are just that, anomalies. It doesn't mean that they are something bad. More so in today's world where there's infrastructure coming up and down all the time. The other novelty of Lumo is that those anomalies, we didn't put those anomalies to the security analysts. Those anomalies were ingested into another AI model that we call deep correlation. And what that AI model does is that it technically measures the distance between every anomaly and the cluster of known bad data that we have. And if they're too close, then there are clear signs on that net new data that there's going to be a compromise affecting those companies. So that's the whole magic, how detecting compromises at speed. And then when you added that with the fact that all our customers are sending the data to the same platform, it's a SaaS platform, completely distributed and sanitized across the multiple tenants that we have, but they are in the same platform. Now you can apply two interesting AI concepts. One is called collective defense. I know you guys are very familiar with this concept, in which, when we identify something that is bad from one company that is using our technology, we automatically protect the entire customers that we have. That's collective defense. And then the other concept is called transfer learning, right? Every company that provides data to Lumu benefits from the learning that Lumu already have from the entire ecosystem. And now we're going to start learning from that one new customer that the platform has. And that learning that we're getting from that new customer that we have is transferred now to the rest of the companies that are using the same platform. So two powerful concepts, collective defense and transfer learning, that are part of the story that we have. And more recently, we launched Lumu Autopilot, right, which enable us to automate security operations. Well, one of the problems that exists in the market, and this was also learning in Lumu, is that we thought that the only problem in Leo was to identify compromises within the networks. We thought naively, perhaps, that companies know what to do when they identify a compromise. And it turns out that they don't. So there was a bigger problem to solve, which is the problem of security operation. And Lumu Autopilot effectively automates that problem, right? When we identify a compromise, we're not only responding to mitigate or isolate that compromise, but we're also automating the management of that incident, right? We'll start monitoring if there are new evolution, if there's new data that we need to ingest or that we need to query from the stack of that the company has to make a final determination of whether that incident is safe to be closed because it doesn't represent any risk for the company after Lumu have taken actions, or is an incident that has to be escalated because their manual intervention is required.
I'm going to ask you two quick questions. The first one is, most people probably don't know that they can use Lumu without being a customer. And you have a very unique approach of making the technology available for people to test, to validate, and to detect compromise without having to pay for the technology. You use what is in the industry called PLG motion, which is very expensive to implement because you really need to have a product that is easy to download, deploy, implement, and that produces value early on. So the first question is, has that strategy proven to you to be more effective than the traditional enterprise sales model?
100%. 100%. I think another of the learning from EC to Lumu is on EC I had to go almost back to banks to test my technology. Here, anyone can go online, open a Lumu free account, and start realizing value of the technology. And that helped us to, in a way, hijack some sales process that we didn't have the ability to get into those sales process early on in the company. All right, but it also accelerates the value that we provide to companies, and it also help us to convey more value and to close quickly some of the deals that we have in the pipeline. It's very, very effective. I recommend that as much as possible.
Fantastic. The second quick question for you is, cybersecurity is an ever-changing landscape. New attack vectors, new risks, technology, AI, Gen AI is becoming something that is going to be prevalent in the next few years. How do you see, and what is your vision for the next 3 to 5 years for Lumu to, number one, stay ahead of these changes in the threat landscape, and number two, also to continue to build this technology moat that you have around the company, because to replicate what you guys are doing is going to take a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of expertise.
It does, and you're right? Cybersecurity is an ever-changing world. I think the one thing that is 100% sure in cybersecurity is that every action that we take on protection is going to create a reaction from the adversary, from the adversary's point of view, right? That's going to be the constant in cybersecurity. I think when you look at the cybersecurity scene today, Leo, we're very proud that the market has finally accepted security operations as the North Star to eliminate threats. If you go into some of the biggest vendors in cybersecurity, they all have a security operations story. You know, whether it is CrowdStrike or Palo Alto or Cisco, they all have a cybersecurity operations story. And I think Lumu was an early player in the market advocating that cybersecurity operation. The lack of rigor in cybersecurity operation is what got us into the problem that exists today. Lumu is positioned to continue to lead the security operation market, and I think that conviction that is gonna replicate across the vendors, and it's gonna replicate across the customers, because the fact that all these vendors now have that thesis of security operation is really giving us tailwinds to educate even more the customers and make them realize that what we were saying 4 years ago is really what is happening. So security operation is a fact. There's no doubt. That's not going to go away. And that's key. So what is the next step? The next stage of Lumu is how we enable the security operator brokers, for lack of a better word, the MDRs, the MSSPs, the MSPs, the resellers, to be able to deliver security operation outcomes over a unified platform. And that's what we call the security transformation. That we're investing significantly in making sure that happens. Some of the larger MSSPs across Latin America are already using our technology. That same story or thesis is being replicated in the US. And in order to do so, we need to make sure that the same concept of continuous compromise assessment is applied, like you well said, to other telemetry in the enterprise, right? Mm-hmm. Endpoints, identities, CloudWorks, or other elements of telemetry that we're now collecting to apply the same concept of continuous compromise assessment. Not only coming from the network, but from the different CloudWorks that CloudWorks that companies have today.
I'm going to state the obvious. Obviously, you have a lot of passion for the technology, the solution, the product, but you are now the CEO of a very vibrant and fast-growing startup in the US, and you have multiple responsibilities, one of which is to deal with me as your board member and to produce results. But how has your role changed over the last 3 or 4 years, from the inception, the idea, the creation of the product, the defining of the go-to-market, to where you are today as the CEO of Lumu?
I think the key on that is to identify where your time is gonna create the bigger impact and the bigger value for the company, right? And on early stages, that was making sure that we were able to recruit the right talent. On some other stages was to make sure that my impact in the business was on product marketing and how we position this technology that in some cases cause nervous or scare people, right? There's a new way of doing things in cybersecurity. So how we make sure that we market that in a way that customers accept that innovation. And in other moments of the business, it was to ensure that we had the right go-to-market strategy for different geographies. Like when I see the time that I'm spending today is how we make sure that we implement the right growth initiatives to sustain the evolution of the business, right? Is it gonna be organic or inorganic? A mix of that, right? We have 3 main bets or growth initiatives. Brazil is growing significantly for this company. The SLED market in the US is growing rapidly in the market, as well as the MSPs. Those are the 3 initiatives. Those are the ones that take the most of my time, making sure that we have the right approach. Making a mistake at this stage in any of this approach can put us back 1 or 2 years. So we want to make sure that those different approaches that we are putting together on these growth initiatives are carefully implemented.
Fantastic. I'm going to do something a little bit off here. You are a very experienced CEO. Not only you're a serial entrepreneur, but through your career, you have developed expertise in all areas of running a business, from technology to sales engineering, go-to-market, capital raising, etc. And you're very generous with your knowledge. So the question that I would like to ask you is, what advice or what career path would you provide to an aspiring cybersecurity founder? Somebody who has an idea, who has that same technical passion that you have, and wants to create a company out of that idea?
Well, the first one is making sure that you find the right problem, right? There are many problems in cybersecurity. It doesn't mean that all of them are gonna create a huge TAM, right? So making sure that you find the right problem. Once you find the right problem, get in love with the problem, not necessarily with the solution. Get in love with the problem. I remember this, Leo, an easy solution for every idea of growing the business. There was always a new product to come out to the market. And that's probably, at some point it may be the right approach, but that's not necessarily the best approach. Like at Lumu, we're very focused on staying on this product, this one product that has a huge TAM, and that discipline helped us to create deep in the product. So the product that we have today, is a state-of-the-art product, is the leader of the NDR market. We're only 4 years plus in the market. Like when you compare with the other players of the market that have 20 years, it's incredible what we had accomplished in only 4 years. So making sure that you have that discipline of focusing on that specific problem. Make sure they find the right team. Right? I'm the face of the company, but I wouldn't be able to do my job if I don't have the executive team that I have. People that are experienced on building products, on building, on marketing the company, on operating the business, right? On operating, the not so sexy part of the business, which is, making sure that you fight the taxes, making sure that you pay, make payroll and some of those stuff. So making sure that you have the right team. Stay safe, stay healthy, right? Building a business. This is no 8 hours job, right? This is it's gonna look more like in some cases 18 hours job. So you have to ensure that you have the energy to do this, to build this, to share the energy among your team. It's cybersecurity. It's hard to build cybersecurity companies without capital, right? So you need to start talking with investors. What we have done with Forgepoint is an example of that. We met. I met Alberto probably at my Easy Solution times, and I met you when Cyxtera, 5-7 years after you decided to invest. So often in my early days as a CEO, I got very frustrated about speaking with investors and getting nothing of that. But really, the investors, the first time that you speak with an investor, you're a dot, right? But then the second time and the third time and so on and so forth, they start building a trajectory of your ability to execute in the company, and that gives them the conviction to eventually invest in the company like you guys did. Perseverance. There are going to be huge problems, tremendous problems when you build a company. And perseverance and resilience is a skill set that all entrepreneurs have to have. That's the only way, honestly, to build a business. Like every day I wake up, I know there are going to be 5 or 7 challenges in a day, and I need to go one by one and making sure that I eliminate the roadblocks that enables the team to be successful. I think that's some of the advice that I can provide.
Fantastic. Ricardo, as I said before, you are always super generous with your knowledge, your experience, and now with your time. And we at Forgepoint, we cannot say nothing more than thank you very much for the partnership. I appreciate the friendship that we have and the patience that you had with me, because I remember when you pitched Lumu the first time. And we are super, super excited about the impact that you guys are having in the industry and the future that Lumu is going to have. So I would like to give you the opportunity to do some closing remarks. But again, thank you from me, from Forgepoint, and I'm sure that everybody's going to enjoy this Forgecast.
Thank you, Leo, for the invitation here. And I echo those words. I truly value the partnership that we have built here with Forgepoint and with the rest of the team. And I'm sure that, the dent that we have made to the market so far is nothing compared with the upside that we have in this business. Thank you for the invitation.
Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. Subscribe to the Forgecast, which is brought to you by Forgepoint Capital. We're a leading cybersecurity and digital infrastructure venture capital firm that invests in exceptional teams protecting a digital future. To learn more about Forgepoint, visit forgepointcap.com or find us on LinkedIn and Twitter.